Hey everyone, throughout my Lowrider restoration series over the course of about 34 chapters, the bike was almost completely disassembled, each section individually restored in separate chapters. The rear portion of the bike also received all sorts of service due to required repairs during that restoration. However, nothing could be said for the front end of the bike, which was essentially used to hold up the bike during this project and remained mostly original. The front brakes were redone, but the suspension was original, and I knew that it was on borrowed time. Nonetheless, the test drives showed the front suspension to be satisfactory, at least for the time being. Right up until the test drive for my clutch replacement, where I lost the seal for one of my front shocks, followed shortly thereafter by the seal for the other front shock. And after being covered in oil, this is what we're left with. So I put the bike back on the lift, and I was going to initially raise the front end to remove the front wheel and start working on it, and had decided that it was probably better to simply back it in and work from the ground for this particular project. It was safer, and I'd have more space to work. I can't recall ever backing the bike into my garage in this position. I believe this was the first time. The jack barely clears. Technically, I've purchased one item for this job. The fork seal rebuild kit from V-Twin, part number 14-0703. And I hope to God they're better than the brake seals I put in, because this is not looking good. I'll hold out judgment till I see what happened, but I don't want to bury the lead. We're talking about suspension today. Ironically, I've placed the jack in the wrong position off to the right, just to show where I'm going to place the jack, under the engine, but not where it interferes with the engine pan itself. Here's the position, and the jack is all set up. We can see the wheel straightens out when I start giving it a couple of turns. Then I check the other side, make sure it clears the frame so they don't all drop like dominoes when it falls off the jack. And while supporting the motorcycle off camera, the jack is raised until the wheel comes just off the ground, and we can move the handlebars back and forth. Because for disassembly, I'm looking for very little clearance off the ground. We're not looking like a foot. We're talking about like half an inch. That's it. The added benefit is while the back shocks do decompress, the back wheel does remain on the ground during this part of the procedure, allowing us to get to our first step, which is the brake caliper removal. And we'll be getting into these with a 3/16 hex. This is the only part of this project that we had covered previously in the restoration project, so this portion is old hat. Now when these pins come loose, the bolts fall back onto the rim, and that's normal. What's not normal is the volume of brake fluid I'm finding on this pin. This doesn't look good at all. Yeah, that's yummy. We'll pull out the next pin and have a look. Yeah, that's also covered with brake fluid. I'll pull off the calipers now, and as I do, yeah, there is no question where these brakes are leaking from. That's just nasty. So we're going to have to deal with that later, but we're not dealing with it now. We're going to put it off to the side. Carefully place it down till I can wrap the brakes. In the short term, I'm going to be taking a shop towel, wrapping it around the brake, at which point some masking tape will wrap around the towel, and that'll stop hitting the rim or whatnot of the fender, just to protect everything. I'm now going to repeat all this on the other side. This caliper may be leaking too. Okay, I'm not 100% sure. If this caliper's leaking, we'll see. If this one's leaking, it's not leaking nearly as bad as the other one, but we'll take a closer look later. Right now, we're just going to wrap it. Onto the axle bolt, I've got a 15/16 socket and a breaker bar, and you better believe I'm securing this bike before I try and loosen this. And it does come loose, and it looked easy, because again, we're using a breaker bar. But the last thing I need is the bike falling off the jack while I'm loosening a bolt. So, remember, safety first. 3 pieces will be coming off: the nut, the lock washer, and the washer. I'll be placing these with all the parts in a magnetic tray. Next, we'll use a 1/2 inch to loosen these slider cap nuts. And I'll leave the slider cap hanging loosely just like this. The same process is then repeated on the other side. And now the axle should be able to push through. I've rolled the small book up under the tire to take away tension from the axle and then slid it out from the bike. I did remember that on my bike, due to reasons, I do have to remove the 4 inner fender bolts before I could pull the tire out because of clearance issues. I repeat the same procedure on the other side. Rolling the wheel forward, I could then remove the speedometer pickup from the side. Now I could jack up the bike just a little bit higher so the tire clears the fender, at which point I'll roll the entire wheel right out. I realize that part of the wheel has fallen onto the floor. I'll pick up that piece in just a minute. It's just a spacer that fell out during disassembly. I'll place it back in for now, but I'll be sure to clean it up before final assembly. In the last part of preparation, I'll remove the fender. So I'm going to raise it up just a little bit and spin the shocks outward. The other shock next. That way the fender will clear and we'll drop it down and out. Just being careful as we do it so we don't damage it. Moving the brake out of the way. Sliding it down. It'll get caught on the drain screws down here, so I'll simply rotate the shocks a little bit to get past those screws all the way down and out. Speedo cable is still connected right now, so I'm just going to place the fender on the floor off to the side. Finally, I cable tied both brake calipers up by the oil cooler just so they wouldn't be hanging around, stressing the hoses, getting in the way, and damaging stuff. I'm going to need to remove the speedometer cable holder bracket from this fender so I can remove the fender, get it out of the way. I'm going to use a 7/16, and it may not be standard to this setup, so I'm going to do it off camera just to get it off of here and continue with the fender elsewhere. Now I could get the fender out of harm's way. And these forks are disgusting, so I'm going to wipe them down and get all this dirt off of here because I don't feel like getting nasty every time I touch them. With the chunks of dirt removed, I'll now spray just a light degreaser on them, let it sit for a little bit once they're fully coated, and then I'm going to go and wipe them down one more time. And then at that point, they should be clean enough to work on. I want everything to stay secure, so I'm going to lock everything down on the security system with this small driver. Running it through the hole here should lock up the neck. It doesn't touch the tank because it's thin enough. Now we don't have to worry about the neck moving back and forth. While I'll be disassembling one side at a time while it's mounted, I do have the opportunity to loosen this screw while it's supported. The nut does interfere with this cluster, as we see over here, so it will have to be moved out of the way by removing these two screws. Using a 3/16 hex bit on a ratchet, I'll loosen both of those screws now. And the headlight assembly will come loose, but I'm not concerned about it falling off. Everything will hold it pretty much in place. Deflected just enough for me to safely access those top caps without obstruction. I just happen to have a 1 3/8 socket for this task, which I'll place on a breaker bar to carefully loosen these caps. And it makes easy work of it with the breaker bar. And I'm not trying to take them off, I'm just trying to loosen them a couple of turns so I can move on to the next step. This cover right here needs to be lifted, held in place by these large screws. I have a driver for this task, though these screws are a little bit worse for wear, but I'm not going to be able to turn it with my hands because they're really in there. So I'm going to attach a vice grip to the end here for added support. Carefully working the screw back and forth a couple of times until it loosens up, at which point I'm able to just unscrew it. The same procedure is done on the other side. That screw is a little bit worse. I may be replacing these screws as part of the reinstallation and assembly. At some point I could just remove the vice grip and unscrew the screws normally without any issue. Gently lifting the headlight out of the way, I can now shimmy this cover up, which will expose the two bolts that now need to be loosened. The forward-facing bolts here and here. With the cover on an angle, it stays up on its own. And these bolts will be loosened with a 9/16 socket. They're definitely in there and will require some encouragement to loosen up. Being careful as I hit it, of course, not to send the bike flying off the jack. Same for the other one. We can see my brake caliper falling off the cable tie, but I'll catch that off camera. The tough part is over. I'll just loosen both of them up now. Using a bit of PB Blaster because it's been sitting for 50 years, I'm going to just spray a little right here on these contact surfaces to help things along for the next step. In these holes, I'll get some in there as well. A little bit on the other side too. And I've got the tiniest rubber mallet that I'm going to tap the top here as I turn until it starts loosening up. It only takes a couple turns. We can see already it's loosening. Things are looking good. I'll repeat this on the other side. Same procedure. until this one starts turning as well, and that one is now loosened up. We could hear Lily responding to the knocking. A quick check from down here, and this one's nice and free now, and this one is also nice and free. Before we go any further, we'll want to drain the oil from the bottom ports right here. Looks like the high side port must have broken a long time ago and has been plugged with JB Weld. All we have is a low side to work with. That would only really be an issue if this wasn't being removed to change the seals, but we are removing it, so it's okay. For completeness, however, we're going to open up this one and have a look, see what we got. Most of it did end up on my face and on my pants and half the bike. So what remains? It's like Geraldo opening up Al Capone's safe. Yeah, it's exactly like Geraldo opening Al Capone's safe. Absolutely nothing. That was underwhelming. So I'm going to put that screw back in, and we're going to proceed with our tasks. It's a little surprise to me that no oil came out of this drain hole. Take note of these threaded holes on the side, and the reason why I bring them up is because if you look at the parts catalog here for the older Super Glide on parts 1 and 24, and in my more modern late 70s manual parts 5 and 4, it says here in the procedure that the upper bracket screws 4 need to be removed, but I don't have them. Did I need them? We'll find out as we remove this cap, putting that large socket on this ratchet, and it is under tension. The spring is slightly compressed under here, so I do have to make sure that I support it as I unscrew it. It's not a lot of compression, it's just going to pop a little bit, and right around here it kicks off. More noise than anything. We'll pull the cap off now, and we have the cap, the rubber O-ring, and that washer. So I'll place these off to the side. Rotating the assembly with some downward pressure, I can work it out of the fixture. Here we see that the end is graduated, limiting how far it could go up into the upper bracket. Inversely, with this setup as removed, this plug and washer does not allow it to come down from the other side of the bracket, holding the entire piece in a position. So this screw hole in the side doesn't appear to secure anything as far as suspension goes. Moving on, we see here most of this is just dirt and PB blaster. I'll just continue rotating with a light downward force until the entire assembly is removed from the bike. Let's take it to the bench. So my intent was to lean it to drain oil into this pan, like so, but this never works out, and the spring shot the whole thing out and oil all over the place. This always seems to happen with me. I'm no stranger to making a mess when I try and drain oil from motorcycles, as we well know if you watch my videos of me trying to drain oil. It pretty much ends up looking just like this. So instead, I pulled out the entire spring, which made more mess, but there was nothing else I could do, and left the spring to hang over the Tupperware container. I figured I would just stand here for a couple of minutes and let it drip, realizing that this was not a good use of my time. So I ended up propping up the spring against my cabinet, and that seemed to work at least a little bit better. Then I flipped over the rest of the assembly, pouring the oil in, and propping that up against the cabinet as well. I'll come back later when everything's drained. This has been draining for a while. In retrospect, I should have compressed it. I probably would have gotten more oil out of it, but neither here nor there. It doesn't matter. Just place it on a towel here, get the drips off, and move it to the bench. I think that oil is ready to be changed. I've wiped down the spring and put it off to the side. This got dirty from handling. I'm just going to wipe this down quickly before we proceed. And we'll begin with the removal of these two bolts because I'm going to have to take this bracket off to access a screw that's under here. Don't drop things. I'll slide this off now, putting it off to the side. And now we have access to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chalk the entire thing up into the vise with a towel wrapped around it to protect it. Not tight, just like a third set of hands. And we're going to be using a metric 6mm hex socket because these are Japanese, one of the few metric parts on the bike. To turn this, we're just going to start to loosen it first. I didn't put it in the vise tight, so I'm going to have to support it with my hand, but it'll hold everything up. Now with it loosened, I'm just going to use an extension and spin that bolt out. There should be a washer with it. And there it is. And as I do that, we could see the oil from the bottom starting to come out, and I threw a towel quickly under there. And I'm running to see where I went and put that oil pan, because I want to put it up here on the bench and let it sit here for a while. Yes, I'm going to walk away for a little bit and let the rest of this drain from the other side. I'm actually going to position it even further on an angle to let it drain quicker. With the oil drained, the lower and upper half can now carefully be separated. I'm just going to slowly pull it right out. Can't damage a broken seal. Place both of these down. I'll move the lower portion out of the way. I'm going to start on the upper portion first. I'm going to give this area a quick cleaning, and this is a seal surface, so if there's any damage to this, it's going to leak, and if I see anything that alarms me, we're going to have to replace this. And while I don't see anything bad right now on the sealing surfaces, I am going to polish it later and then reinvestigate and see what we got going on. The inside of the lower portion looks absolutely delicious. Look at that. That's not going to ever leak. With the use of a flathead screwdriver and a small rubber mallet, I'll knock off the chrome cover of the dust cover, giving it light wraps. As it slowly comes off, I rotate the entire piece and move over to another section to hit that, and we can see that comes off a bit, and rotate it again until the entire metal cover pops off. The cover helps keep all the goodness in. The dust cover looks about as good as you would expect. We're going to be removing the dust cover next. Same procedure again as with the dust cover cap, tapping it gently with the mallet and the screwdriver, giving it a couple turns to hit it on the other side, and it should pop right off. This time less dramatic, however, as I could just remove it with my fingers. And that looks nasty on the bottom as well. Now somewhere in here is a retaining clip for the seal, and you can't actually see it because it's that dirty. But if I remove enough of the dirt and sludge, it should start to reveal itself. What's left of the retaining clip is now visible, and I'm just going to pry it up with a flathead screwdriver. Work it around the inside until the entire clip pops off. Sorry for the wonderful camera work here. There it is. Just bring it around and out. The old seal is ready to be pried out, but before we do, we're going to clean up everything thoroughly, because it's no fun working on dirty parts. With a little encouragement, the damper tube can be made to slide out of the slide tube. We'll give this a quick wipe down, then we'll have a look. These two rings are going to be replaced, so I'll remove them now. The top one is easily removed from the top like so. It's clearly seen better days. And the bottom one is easier to remove from the bottom. Slide it down. Everything under here appears to be fine. The inside's a bit nasty, but we'll deal with that later. Using a standard seal puller, I'll carefully pry out the oil seal from the slider. Apologizing for my lovely camera work, everybody gets to stare at my arm. But very carefully, I pop the seal out with no incident. Taking a look at the old seal as removed, it does appear to be entirely intact, like no chunks have broken off or anything like that. I place it back on the slider tube with a little bit of the old oil just to see if there was any integrity left on the oil seal, and at no pressure, yeah, there was. It's not like chunks of that seal were missing. I just wanted to see for my own curiosity. Interestingly, somebody did use sealant to install this seal around the perimeter on the mating surface, so that's something. I'll clean up that area now so we could have a look. And if I end up finding something that I don't like, I may have to use sealant too, or some sort of method around the perimeter, because I don't want it leaking on the outside of the seal. We're going to need a better cleaning though. I have an elongated box with packaging material and heavy plastic. The packaging material will reduce the overall area of the box. The plastic will be our swimming pool. All of our project pieces will be placed into the box. Then using high-grade kerosene, the box will be filled as to cover all the parts and left to soak for several hours. To increase the height of the liquid, other project pieces were also added that could benefit from the degreasing. And so the waiting game begins. After an inspection, I can see the parts are ready to come out, so I'm shaking off the kerosene. This spring is perfectly clean. So is this axle cap. The axle itself cleaned up very nice. The fork stem cap looks good. I'll remove that seal and re-clean it later. The slide tube came out immaculate, inside and out. I was very happy with the result. The lowest slide needed a lot more time and work owing to the crap collecting on the bottom in a hard to reach area. You can see all that dirt coming out every time I lift it. So that one got special attention. Even after this whole box thing was done, this sat in a cup so that the bottom couple inches could be submerged in kerosene. With that, I moved on to the damper tube, which also cleaned up very nice, though we'll inspect the passages and blow it out and make sure that everything is absolutely clean. None of this kerosene is actually wasted. It is being pumped into a jug where it will then be filtered and pumped into another jug and reused again. But for now, it's about cleanup. So here's the kerosene, 1 gallon collected. I'll cap it. Probably lost about a quarter cup in the process. Everything is clean, ready for assembly, but it needs more parts than I ordered, so I'm going to have to order some more parts. So that concludes part 1 in this series of this AMF Lowrider front end rebuild. I hope you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below, helps me out a lot when you do, and hit that subscribe button for more videos like this when they come out. When the next video in the series posts, a link will be provided in the top right corner. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?